The 5th year after our fairy tale ended. My son was 4. His name is Sway Sway. Because when he was born, Chinen held him and said, "May we be together year after year." Sway Sway learned to say daddy first, and then love mommy. Chin's eyes crinkled with laughter then. And he hugged both Sway Sway and me, saying we were his whole world. The story stopped on the most perfect page. The prince and princess lived happily ever after. No one told me that forever only lasts for 5 years. This morning, Sway Sway was reluctant to get out of bed, his little hand clutching my pajama button tightly. "Mommy smells good." Sway Sway wants to sleep for 5 more minutes. Chinen was already dressed and leaning against the doorframe, watching us. The morning light cast a golden halo on his profile, still as handsome as ever, still making my heart flutter. He walked over, ruffled Sway Sway hair, and then leaned down to plant a kiss on my forehead. "Good morning, my leading lady." His voice was low and gentle, just like when he recited his wedding vows. I watched his slender fingers as he knotted his tie, the wedding ring still on his finger, glinting softly. After dropping Sway Sway off at kindergarten, I detoured to that old-fashioned pastry shop in the west of the city. Chinen had casually mentioned last night before bed that he wanted to eat their walnut crisps. While waiting in line, I ran into Mrs. Chen, our neighbor, who took my hand and praised, "Xiao Wan, you are so lucky. Mr. Shin is so presentable and family-oriented. Unlike my husband." I smiled and agreed, but my heart felt like honey-soaked cotton, soft and sweet. Yes, my Shinin is a model husband in everyone's eyes. So much of a model that even his cheating is done silently and decently. Discovering that message was purely accidental. Sway Sway toy car rolled under the sofa, and as I lay on the floor to reach it, I found Shin's old phone, which had slipped off unnoticed. The phone was dead. When I plugged it in and it turned on automatically, a new notification popped up on the screen. "See you tomorrow at the usual place. Missing you." The sender's name wasn't saved, just a string of numbers. The profile picture was a blurry sunset, a girl's silhouette, her long hair blowing in the wind. My heartbeat seemed to forget to beat at that moment. I sat on the sofa, staring at that phone for a long time. So long that it was almost time for Sway Sway to get out of school in the afternoon. The tea Shinin loved was still steeping in the kitchen, and his shirt from yesterday was hanging on the balcony, ironed perfectly. There was a faint, unfamiliar perfume scent on the collar. I had previously thought it was accidentally picked up in the elevator. Now, putting that scent together with this message suddenly painted a picture I didn't recognize. I felt a little dazed when I went to pick up Sway Sway. He threw himself into my arms like a little swallow, holding up a clay ring he made in his art class. "For mommy. One for daddy. One for mommy." The little ring was crooked, but he solemnly slipped it onto my ring finger, covering the real wedding ring. I knelt down and hugged him, burying my face in his little, milky-smelling shoulder. "Sway Sway. If what?" I couldn't bring myself to ask. Chinen had a social engagement that night and sent a message saying he would be home late. I lulled Sway Sway to sleep and sat alone in the living room. The lights were off, and only the faint hum of the aquarium's oxygen pump could be heard. The old phone sat on the coffee table like a burning ember. I finally picked it up. The password hadn't changed. It was still Sujui's birthday. The chat history was wiped clean, with nothing except today's message. But there was something that slipped through the net in the photo album. A photo taken half a month ago, during the 3 days I took Sway Sway back to my parents' house. In the photo, Chinen was wearing the loungewear ID bought him, standing by the island counter in our open kitchen, smiling at the camera. The person taking the photo, outside the frame, must have been standing where I often stand now. The caption read, "Wearing the clothes you picked. Making the dishes you taught me. Teacher Shin." Have I graduated? I covered my mouth and ran to the bathroom, gagging. Nothing came up, only large tears falling onto the white porcelain of the sink. I remembered those 3 days when Shannon video called me every day. The living room as his background. He said he missed me and Sway Sway. That the house felt empty. It turned out, the empty house had already been filled by someone else. Filled my kitchen, my living room, my husband. At 1 in the morning, Shannon came home, reeking of alcohol. And that more distinct perfume ID smelled on his collar during the day. He leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head away. What's wrong? He paused, then smiled, reaching out to put his arm around my waist. Is my Wan unhappy today? Tired? I heard my voice. Surprisingly calm. Go take a shower. He mumbled. My wife's dislike me, and swayed slightly as he headed to the bathroom. The sound of water started. I walked to the entrance and picked up his discarded suit jacket. Carefully, inch by inch, I searched. In the corner of the inner lining pocket. My fingertip touched something hard. I pulled it out. It was a pearl stud earring. Small, bright, and with a young and lively design. Not something someone like me, a mother, would wear. I put the earring back where I found it. As if I hadn't discovered anything, Shannon came out of the shower. His hair wet, his eyes a little hazy from the alcohol. He hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. Wan. He murmured, I love you. He said this every night. It used to be honey, but now it was needles, pricking finely and densely in the softest part of my heart. I didn't respond. I just gently pulled away. Sway Sway has a parent-child sports day tomorrow. You remember, right? I remember. Of course, I remember, he said immediately, with an almost deliberate enthusiasm. I've pushed everything aside. Even if the sky falls, I'll be there with you. See. He was still a good dad. At the parent-child sports day, he was indeed the most dazzling dad there, running races with Sway Sway in his arms, carrying Sway Sway to grab the colored flags, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, smiling brighter than the sun. Sway Sway hugged his neck, her little face flushed with pride. My dad is the best. I stood at the edge of the field, applauding and smiling, but my eyes felt a little sore. What a perfect picture. If I didn't know that just yesterday. He used these hands that held his son. Perhaps also to embrace another woman's waist. During halftime, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. A momentary unnaturalness flashed across his face. And then he hung up. Sales call, he explained to me, and then put his phone on silent. All afternoon, that screen in his pocket flickered on and off many times, like a restless, peering eye. In the evening, Sway Sway was so tired that she went to bed early. Shannon was in the study, saying he had an urgent email to reply to. I brought a glass of milk over. The door was ajar. He was facing away from the door. His voice was very low, but loud enough for me to hear. Don't make a fuss. I'm really tired today. I know. The weekend. I'll try my best on the weekend. She's fine. Doing well. Love you. Me too. I took a step back. The wooden floor made a slight creak sound. The whispers in the study stopped abruptly. A few seconds later, Shannon opened the door, his face still carrying tenderness and a hint of panic. Wan, how did you come without a sound? Milk. I handed him the glass, my fingertips icy cold. Drink it and go to bed early. He took the glass, his eyes searching my face. I looked up and smiled at him, like every day for the past 5 years. Good night, Shannon. On the weekend, he said the company had an emergency and he had to work overtime. I straightened his tie and said, Go ahead. Work is important. Sway Sway and I are going to see a movie. He was relieved. And also full of guilt as he kissed Sway Sway and me. Wait for me for dinner tonight. They'll bring back your favorite cake from that place. The door closed. I took Sway Sway's hand and we didn't go to the movies. We got into a taxi and gave the driver an address. It was the address on the takeout slip that was accidentally captured in the corner of the kitchen photo on his old phone. Y upscale apartment complex. The car stopped across the street from the complex. Sway Sway asked me, "Mommy, aren't we going to see a movie?" Mommy is taking Sway Sway to get familiar with the way first. I heard my voice sounding faint. In the future. In case Mommy gets lost. Sway Sway needs to know how to find Daddy. We waited for about 40 minutes. We saw Shin An's car drive into the complex. Familiarly park under one of the buildings. We saw him get out of the car, really holding a box of cake. From that cake shop that Sway Sway and I love the most. We saw him go upstairs, without ringing the doorbell, but directly opening the door with a key. Sway Sway suddenly pointed at that window. "Mommy, that curtain. It's the same as ours." "Yes. Last month." I said the living room curtains were old and I wanted to change them. Chinan said picking curtains was too troublesome. He had a friend bring a set of designer curtains from abroad. Now, that designer set is also hanging in someone else's apartment, hanging on the window of my husband's other home. I didn't cry, nor did I rush forward. I just covered Sway Sway's eyes, even though he probably didn't understand what he was seeing. Sway Sway. Let's go see a movie. The animated film we watched that day was lively, colorful, and filled with laughter. Sway Sway laughed so hard he leaned back and forth. And I, wearing 3D glasses in the darkness, let the tears soak the thick lenses. His small hand reached over and held my finger. "Mommy, are you crying?" "No." I sniffled. "The movie is just too dazzling." Chinan came home early that evening, and indeed brought a cake. He excitedly recounted the details of his overtime, how he solved the problem, and how his colleagues admired him. What good acting! If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have almost succumbed to the normality he had woven. "Oh, right. I have to go on a business trip next week. For about 3 or 4 days," he said casually as he cut the cake. "Where to?" "Shenzhen." An old project. But I clearly saw a corner of the plane ticket itinerary sticking out of his pocket, with the destination as Sanya, the place where we went on our honeymoon, during the days he was on business trip. I sent Sway Sway to my mother's house. I said I wanted to be alone and sort through some old things. My mother looked at me worriedly. "Chao Wan, are you and Shinan arguing?" "No." I shook my head. "We're fine. I'm just a little tired." Returning to the empty house, I could finally stop pretending. I sat on the living room floor and opened the heavy wedding album. In the photos, we were smiling so carefree. He said he would give me a fairy tale-like happiness for the rest of my life. Then I pulled out all the videos of Sway Sway from birth to now. First time rolling over. First time walking. First time calling Mommy and Daddy. Chinan was always the voice behind the camera. Recording with love. The love and evidence that once supported my entire world now seemed like a delicate bubble, easily burst with a poke. I opened his wardrobe, his study drawers, his electronic device backup cloud storage. Like a detective, I collected clues of my husband's betrayal, only to realize that when you start to suspect, everything leaves a trace. Those overtime nights, those hurried hang-up calls, the sudden increase in impatience with family life, the indifference that took my carefully prepared efforts more and more for granted. It's not that the marriage has entered a period of dullness, it's that his love and passion have shifted their ground. The day before he came back, I received an anonymous package. Inside was a stack of photos. Chinan and that woman. smiling at each other in a cafe, embracing reluctantly by the car, walking side by side into a hotel. The last picture was yesterday, on the beach in Sonya. He was carrying her running on the sand. Just like he carried me back then. On the back of the photo, there was a line of delicate handwriting. He doesn't love you anymore. What's the point of guarding an empty shell? Looking at that line, I suddenly felt ridiculous and laughable. The person who sent these photos thought they could break me. Little did she know, what hurt more than seeing these images was the self-doubt and slow torment I'd endured, day after day. Under the sweet facade of the past few months, she gave me the final proof, and the final liberation. The day Shannon returned, it was drizzling. He brought gifts for me and Sway Sway, a beautiful silk scarf for me, and a remote control boat for Sway Sway. He talked about his experiences in Shenzhen, complained about the busy work, but looked radiant, as if had returned from a vacation. Sway Sway snuggled into his arms, acting spoiled. He held his son and looked at me with gentle eyes. Honey, did you miss me? I was wearing an apron, simmering soup. The rising steam blurred my vision. Yes, I said. I've figured it out. After dinner, Sway Sway was asleep. I sat on the sofa and gently pushed the stack of photos in front of him. The smile on his face instantly froze, the color draining away, turning pale. Wan. Let me explain. His voice was dry and trembling. Explain what? I looked at him calmly, even surprised by my own composure. Explain why you're wearing the clothes I bought you. In our kitchen, cooking for another woman. Explain why you used the same hands that held our son at his sports day to hold someone else's. Explain why you took her to Sonya, to the place we said we'd go as a family of 3 again when Sway Sway was a little older. He choked. All words of defense stuck in his throat. She's a new intern at the company. Too young. Made a mistake. He was incoherent. I love you, Sway Sway. This family, Wan. Believe me. They'll break it off with her immediately. He knelt down, grabbed my hand, and tears streamed down his face. I can't live without you. Please, Wan. Give me another chance. For Sway Sway's sake. Sway Sway. Always Sway Sway. Our love began with sweetness, and his repentance ended in responsibility, and my feelings never seemed to be his top priority. Shannon. I slowly pulled my hand away. On our wedding day, I thought I had the whole world. Now I know. That world was made of paper, and it scattered with a gust of wind. He slumped to the ground, like a shattered empty shell. I got up, walked into the bedroom, and calmly began packing my luggage. Not much, just one suitcase. Packed a few clothes, some of Sway Sway necessities, our documents, and that wedding photo album. He rushed in, blocking me. Where are you going? I won't let you leave. I'm not asking for your permission. I looked up at him, at this man I had loved for many years, now unrecognizable. Shannon. The leading lady can also go offline, especially when her script has been altered beyond recognition. I pulled the suitcase to the door, and finally looked back at this home that had held countless dreams and sacrifices. The lawyer will contact you. About Sway Sway. About the divorce. Before you figure out who you truly love and what you really want. Sway Sway will stay with me. The moment the door closed, I heard his suppressed, broken sobs. Outside the building, the rain had stopped at some point. The wind was still blowing, but it seemed gentler. I took a deep breath of the cool air, took out my phone, and booked a ticket home, taking Sway Sway, leaving this city full of lies. 5 years after the sweet novel ending. My husband cheated on me. My fairy tale, finally shattered. But it's okay. I will, for myself and Sway Sway, write a brand new beginning. even without a prince. A true princess can crown herself. It was already dark when I got back to my parents' house. My mom opened the door. When she saw the suitcase at my feet and the sleepy-eyed Sway leaning on my shoulder, the smile on her face froze. My dad walked over from the living room, still holding the watering can. "What's wrong?" he asked in a low voice, afraid of waking Sway. I settled Sway in the room I had before I got married. The little one was exhausted. As soon as she touched the bed, she rolled over, hugging my old doll, and fell into a deep sleep. Gently closing the door, I walked to the living room. Mom had already poured me a glass of warm water, warm in my hands. Dad sat on the rattan chair opposite me, his brow furrowed. I opened my mouth, but found that the words I had rehearsed countless times in my mind were now stuck in my throat like stones. In the end, I just gently placed the stack of photos on the glass coffee table, sliding them over. The living room was extremely quiet, with only the ticking of the old-fashioned wall clock. Mom picked up the photos, looking at them one by one. Her hands started to tremble, and her lips pressed tightly, turning white. Dad took the photos, glanced at them, and then slammed them face down on the table, making a dull thud. His chest heaved, and the veins on his forehead throbbed. "Bastard." He squeezed out 4 words between his teeth, his voice suppressing thunderous rage. Mom didn't say anything, but stood up, walked over, and hugged me tightly. Her embrace had the fragrance of laundry detergent, exactly like in my childhood memories. This hug made my always straight back suddenly relax. I buried my face in her shoulder, and tears finally poured down. Not grievance, but more like a string that had been stretched too tight for too long. Finally finding a safe place to relax. "Divorce," Dad said decisively. One word, taking root. "My daughter is not to be treated like this. We can afford to raise Sway. Mom patted my back, her voice choked with emotion, but unusually firm. "You being well is more important than anything." At that moment, I knew that my fallback was not a room, but 2 mountains that would always open their doors and light up for me. The next day, the lawyer called Shannon. I was on the balcony of my parents' house, looking at the newly bloomed roses in the flower bed downstairs, listening to the lawyer using calm and professional terms to convey my divorce demands. The division of property was clear and concise, and I had custody of the child, with him having visitation rights. Over the phone, Shannon's voice came faintly through the lawyer's speakerphone, distorted, yet still revealing shock and panic. "No, impossible. I want to talk to Wan." The lawyer looked at me, and I shook my head. "Mr. Shin, my client currently does not wish to communicate with you directly. All matters will be handled by me. Let her answer the phone," he interrupted, almost roaring. "This is between me and my wife." Wife. The word sounded incredibly ironic at this moment. I took the phone from the lawyer, turned off the speakerphone, and held it to my ear. "Shannon." My voice was so calm that I didn't recognize it. Wan. "Listen to me. I was confused yesterday." His words were extremely fast, with the urgency of a drowning person grabbing a piece of driftwood. "What the lawyer said is what I meant." I interrupted him. "A divorce by agreement is dignified for both of us." "I don't agree," he said decisively. "I will never get a divorce. Sway needs a complete family. We need to talk. What needs to be talked about is between you and your intern." I looked at the clouds rolling in the distance. "Shannon." "My parents have seen the photos too." There was a sudden pause in breathing on the other end of the phone. "You." He sounded like he was being strangled. "Sign it," I said. "Don't wear away the last bit of affection we have left." Then I hung up the phone and blocked all his contact methods. The world became quiet. The huge stone that had been pressing on my chest seemed to have loosened a corner, but he clearly wasn't going to let this peace last. On the evening of the third day, the doorbell rang. My mother looked through the peephole and her face darkened. It was Shinan. He was carrying bags of nutritional products and toys, standing outside the door, his hair neatly combed, but with unshaven stubble on his chin, and dark circles under his eyes. Looking haggard and sincere. Dad, Mom, I'm here to see Wanwan and Sui Sui. His voice came through the door panel, humble unlike himself. My father didn't open the door, and said in a deep voice through the door, Xiao Shin, go back. Wanwan doesn't want to see you now, Dad. Just let me say a few words. I want to apologize to Wanwan and Sui Sui. Don't call me Dad. My father's voice suddenly became stern. The grievances my daughter suffered with you can't be undone with just a few apologies. Go back. There was silence outside the door for a moment. Then the heavy footsteps gradually faded away. Sui Sui ran out of the room, raised his head and asked, Grandpa, did Daddy come? Mom quickly squatted down and hugged him. Does Sui Sui miss Daddy? Sui Sui nodded, then shook his head, his little face a little confused. Miss. But Mommy cried. Is Daddy bad? Children's words are innocent, but they hit the nail on the head. He didn't give up. In the following weeks, he appeared in various ways. Sometimes it was on weekend mornings, with Sushui's favorite zoo-themed breakfast takeaway, waiting downstairs, saying he just wanted to see his son. Sometimes it was after work hours, him in a suit and leather shoes, leaning against the car, holding a large bouquet of tulips that I used to love, his eyes searching the windows of my house. He even went through our friends to pass on messages, saying that he had fired the intern whether true or not, that he had seen a psychologist, that he was in agony, that he couldn't live without us, my parents. From initially strongly refusing him, later, faced with his persistent sincere attitude, and the occasional longing for her father that Sui Sui revealed, inevitably had mixed feelings. One night, my mother, while Sui Sui was asleep, sat by my bed and cautiously said, Xiao Wan, Mom isn't trying to persuade you to forgive him. Mom sees you, raising Sui Sui alone, and having to start working again. It's too tiring. If he is truly repentant. Mom. I took her hand. Her hand was a little rough from years of labor, but infinitely warm. A broken mirror, even if glued together, reflects a cracked image. I'm tired. I don't want to live the rest of my life in that crack. My mother looked at me for a long time, and finally sighed, patting the back of my hand. It's good that you've thought it through. Mom will always stand by you. My father's attitude was more direct. One time when Shinan was loitering downstairs again, my father went downstairs directly, and the two men talked for a long time in the twilight. When he came back, my father's face was livid, and he only said one sentence to me. This kid is insincere. He says he's repenting, but every sentence is about his property, his face, and the fact that he can't have a divorce record. Daughter, this divorce is a must. My heart, in my father's words, completely calmed down, and also became completely hardened. The tug-of-war lasted for 2 months. The path of amicable divorce was impossible. He refused to sign. Eventually, on the advice of a lawyer, I filed a divorce lawsuit with the court. The day I submitted the documents was a cloudy day. I walked out of the courthouse, took a deep breath of the cool air, and felt not the relief I had imagined, but a sense of steadfastness. The court proceedings were lengthy. At the first mediation, he cried bitterly, stating his reluctance to part with us, and accusing me of being heartless and not caring about the child. I remained silent throughout, only providing the mediator with backups of those photos and detailed bank statements showing his abnormal spending during that period. Mediation was unsuccessful. and we entered the trial process. During this time, we began a de facto separation. I stopped paying attention to his comings and goings, his performances. My attention had to shift to a more important place: how to support myself and Sway Sway. Having been a full-time housewife for several years, the workplace was already unfamiliar to me. The large blank spaces on my resume were like silent mockery. I entrusted Sway Sway to my retired parents and began to frantically send out resumes. From my field of journalism and media, to planning, to copywriting, even administration, the responses were few, and the occasional interviews mostly disappeared without a trace. Anxiety was like vines, quietly entangling me in the dead of night, until that day, while rummaging through the old storage box for Sway Sway's birth certificate, I found a hardcover notebook at the bottom. On the title page, there was my flamboyant handwriting from college, shouldering social responsibility with an iron will, crafting prose with a skillful hand. Lin Wan, Department of Journalism. Beneath it was a small, yellowed clipping. My first in-depth report published in the school newspaper. An investigation into the living conditions of the school's logistics workers. I still remember how long I spent interviewing for that article and how many times I revised it. As my fingertips traced over those printed words, something dormant in my blood suddenly awakened. I deactivated my old social media account, which I only used for recipes and childcare tips. Using my real name and a simple professional photo, I registered for a new social media account. I started writing, no longer just trivial daily events, but instead, I calmed my mind, observed, thought, and wrote. I wrote about the early morning hustle of the breakfast stall couple downstairs at 3 a.m., about the urban wanderings behind each bouquet of flowers sold by the flower-selling grandma at the subway entrance, about observations and reflections on the new educational model in Sway Sway Kindergarten. The perspectives were realistic, and the writing was simple. I was not impatient for quick success, but rather like planting a tree, watering it a little each day. The turning point came from a lengthy article on a chronicle of the survival of the city's used book market. I spent half a month visiting the city's few remaining used bookstores and mobile bookstalls, listening to the owners and vendors tell their stories of entanglement with books and with the times. The article, accompanied by photos I took myself that were full of storytelling, was posted on the platform. Overnight, the article was reposted by multiple culture-related accounts, and the number of views skyrocketed. In the comments section, many people said they saw their childhood and remembered their forgotten reading time. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number. The caller was Editor Chin, the editor-in-chief of a rather influential online cultural magazine. She said she had seen my article and loved my perspective on observing life and my calm and powerful writing. "Miss Lin, would you be interested in writing for us? A column or a feature is fine. We are looking for authors who can calm their minds and record local culture and urban memories." Sweat beaded in my palms, and I steadied my voice. "I'm interested. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity." After hanging up the phone, I sat quietly in the silent room for a long time. Then I walked to the mirror and looked at the woman inside whose eyes had once been a little dim. I gently said to her, "Welcome back, Reporter Lin." The column was called City Notes, 1 article per week. The payment was not generous, but it was enough for me to stand up straight in front of my parents. I picked up my interview notebook and recorder again, and I relearned the editing and writing skills of the new media era. During the day, I was an observer and listener moving through the city's streets and alleys. At night, after putting Sway Sway to sleep, I refined the sights and thoughts of the day into words under the lamp. After the first column article was published, Editor Chin sent a message. "Wan, the article is very good, profound and meaningful. Keep it up. Wan. No longer Mrs. Shin. No longer Sujui's mom. I am Lin Wan, a writer. The feeling of being recognized for my own abilities is like a long-awaited rain after a drought, gradually nourishing my nearly dried-up sense of self-worth. Opportunities began to slowly knock on my door. Commissions from the local newspaper's supplement, content consultant invitations from new media companies, and even an editor from a publishing house asking if I was interested in compiling my column articles into a book. Life is still busy, even more tiring than before, balancing work, spending time with Sway Sway, and dealing with the long divorce proceedings. But I feel like every bone in my body is full of strength. It's a strength that grows from my own soil, no longer dependent on anyone. The 2 years of separation were like a long and quiet transformation. Shannon still comes to see Sway Sway regularly. The law states that I have no right to prevent it. His visits went from deliberate displays and attempts to reconcile at the beginning to a gradually routinized companionship. Perhaps he finally understood that my heart, like fired porcelain, is only hard after cooling. Sway Sway is growing up and has started elementary school. He shares with me interesting things about seeing his father, and writes in his compositions. My mom is a journalist. She's amazing and can write articles that many people read. My world is no longer just a kitchen stove and a home. It has become open again, filled with topics, deadlines, interviewees, reader feedback. These vivid and slightly stressful words make me truly feel alive. Alive as Lin Wan. One evening 2 years later, I had just finished a feature interview about the future of craftsmen in the old city's renovation and returned home. Covered in dust. Downstairs, I encountered Shannon, who was coincidentally there again. He was thinner than he had been 2 years ago. His clothes were still exquisite, but the confident light that once controlled everything in his eyes had dimmed a lot. He looked at me, his gaze a little complicated, falling on the professional recording equipment in my hand, on my face, which was flushed from walking fast but looked radiant. Wan, he said, his tone with a long-lost gentleness, even with a hint of imperceptible bitterness. You have changed a lot. I stopped and met his gaze frankly. Really? I smiled, a smile that had no resentment, no deliberately displayed lightness, but only a kind of calmness that had settled after time. People always change. His lips moved, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he just said, Sway Sway said that your book is going to be published. Congratulations. Thank you. I nodded, my tone polite and distant. The visitation time hasn't arrived yet. Wait a moment. They'll go upstairs to pick Sway Sway up. After saying that, I brushed past him, entered the password, and the door of the building opened gently and closed behind me. Without looking back, I know that Lin Wan's uphill growth has just begun. The scenery of the past, whether sweet or stormy, has been left behind, becoming a stretch of road on the way here. A journey I no longer need to look back on frequently. The wind is still blowing, but this time, I am the one deciding the direction. The day the court's judgment came down was a rare sunny day. Sunlight streamed through the blinds of the law firm's conference room, cutting stripes of light and shadow on the floor. My lawyer pushed the document with the red stamp to me, with a professional, restrained smile on his face. Miss Lin, the judgment is in effect. Custody and property division have basically supported our claims. My fingers traced the edge of the cold paper, the black printed words clear. Divorce granted. There was no expected sense of relief, nor sorrow, like someone who had trekked for a long time, finally reaching a set coordinate point. There was a brief emptiness in my heart, immediately filled with an ultimate, almost illusory calm. Shannon sat at the other end of the long table. He hired the best lawyer, made a final struggle, trying to get a bigger share of the property, trying to prove that I was unable to raise the child due to long-term detachment from society. But the evidence, the facts, and the record of me regaining my footing in the past 2 years, made his claims seem pale and weak. He signed his name, the pen tip trembling slightly. He looked up at me, his eyes complex, with lingering unwillingness, a hint of embarrassment, and perhaps a bit of dawning loss that even he himself was unwilling to admit. We didn't speak. Like two opponents who had completed a long tug-of-war, the rope suddenly snapped, and each retreated, leaving only a deep, irreparable rift in the middle. Walking out of the courthouse, the sun was a bit dazzling. I squinted and took a deep breath. The air had the tipsy scent of early summer vegetation, and the unique smell of concrete baked by the sun. The taste of freedom, a little strange, a little pungent, but incredibly real. My share of the property was quickly divided, a substantial sum, enough to keep me and Sway Sway worry-free for quite some time, and also gave me more composure to plan my career in life. I used part of it to buy a small but cozy second-hand apartment near my parents' community. It has bright floor-to-ceiling windows and a small balcony where I can plant some flowers and plants. Sway Sway has his own room, with wallpaper he chose himself, printed with stars and astronauts. My parents came to help on moving day. My mother, while nagging about me not organizing things well, carefully wiped clean the news award trophies and certificates I had won in college, and placed them on the most prominent bookshelf in the study. My father, on the other hand, was holding a toolbox, twisting here and knocking there, making sure every outlet was safe and every window was secure. Sway Sway excitedly ran back and forth in the empty living room, the echo making him feel extremely novel. "Mom, is this our new home? Forever?" I squatted down and hugged him. "Yes, forever. Sway Sway and Mom's home." He wrapped his arms around my neck and whispered, "I love this home. It smells like Mom and sunshine." In that moment, my heart was filled with a warm, swelling sense of happiness. I no longer needed to prove myself to anyone, no longer depended on anyone's giving. This was a solid nest I had built with my own hands. Life flowed forward like a river that had finally been cleared, calm and smooth. My column City Notes was published as a collection, and sales were unexpectedly good. The publisher was planning reprints and book signings. More media platforms approached me for collaborations, inviting me to write features, and some even asked me to be a guest speaker for nonfiction writing. Work was still busy, but I controlled the pace. I began to learn to reject purely commercial invitations that went against my original intentions, leaving more time for in-depth topics I really wanted to pursue. And for Sway Sway, on weekends, I took Sway Sway to museums, to suburban parks to identify plants, and to children's concerts. His smile was bright, his personality cheerful, and he made good friends at school. He occasionally mentioned his father, like a relative he was on okay terms with but didn't see often. There were no intense loves or hates, only simple, childlike narratives. Chinan paid child support on time and visited regularly. As Sway Sway's schoolwork increased and his own life changed, the frequency of their meetings gradually stabilized at once or twice a month. Sometimes they went to amusement parks, sometimes just had a meal. Sway Sway would share his experiences when he came back, and I would listen quietly, without questioning or judging. Chinan and I were like two rivers that had once converged fiercely and then separated decisively, each flowing into different basins, maintaining only a necessary and distant point of intersection on matters concerning our child. I heard that he left his original company and started a business with partners, with ups and downs, no longer as smooth as he used to be. As for the later story between him and that intern, I never actively inquired, only through whispers and rumors, or from the flickering words of a few mutual acquaintances, could I piece together some fragmented glimpses. They didn't break up cleanly immediately as he had vowed. They went through breakups and reconciliations, dragging on for a long time. The passion quickly dissipated in the friction of reality and the exposure of each other's calculations. He may have been seeking lost youthful thrills and admiration in her, while her innocence and enthusiasm, which initially attracted him, gradually turned into demands and insecurities. It is said that when they argued fiercely, she would bring up old scores, scolding him for being unfaithful and for using his power to seduce her in the first place. He, on the other hand, was annoyed by her lack of understanding and her increasingly strong desire for control. The relationship became a mess, but whether out of habit, unwillingness, or that twisted, mutually tormenting bond, they never completely separated, but they were also slow to move towards marriage. I think, for a proud and selfish person like Shannon, marriage means responsibility, constraints, and the binding of property. A divorce had already cost him dearly, and he probably couldn't afford to lose a second time. And that girl, having sacrificed her reputation and youth, couldn't get the guarantee of a marriage certificate. Her resentment would only grow day by day. A deformed balance, built on quicksand. Life moved forward peacefully. I published another book, this time an oral history of intangible cultural heritage inheritors in the city, which received good reviews in the industry. Sway Sway was in the 3rd grade, growing quickly, and beginning to look a bit like a young boy. One ordinary afternoon, I was organizing interview recordings in my study when my phone screen lit up. It was a message from a friend I hadn't contacted in a long time, someone who used to have business dealings with Shannon. The tone was a bit strange, with an almost intrusive probing. Lin Wan, how have you been? I heard Shannon is getting married. My fingers paused. I replied, is that so? Wish him happiness. The other party quickly sent another message. The bride is kind of interesting. Want me to send you a photo? The profile is practically a bit like you back then. Looking at that sentence, a bizarre feeling swept through my heart, like watching a clumsy drama that somehow conformed to some dark logic. I didn't reply, nor did I ask for a photo. I turned off my phone and continued listening to the old craftsman in the headset speaking in dialect about how to choose a suitable piece of wood. His voice old and calm. Some mud doesn't need to be stepped in again. Some dramas don't need to be watched. However, what's meant to come will come, in a more dramatic way. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered, and it was a calm and urgent voice from a hospital nurse, asking if I was Shannon's emergency contact. She informed me that Shannon had been attacked, suffering severe chemical burns to his face and neck, and was being rescued. The attacker was controlled on the spot. It was the intern who had been entangled with him for years, on and off. A girl who was no longer young. I didn't go to the hospital immediately. Legally, I no longer had an obligation. Emotionally, it felt more like hearing a remote social news story, full of surprise but lacking in deeper emotion. The next day, the police contacted me for a brief inquiry to understand their past relationship. From the police's fragmented narrative and the later compilation of some gossip, the final scene of the whole story unfolded in a bloody manner. It turned out that Shannon was indeed preparing to get married. The woman was a gentle and quiet young girl from an ordinary family, reportedly someone he met through a matchmaking arrangement. The most ironic thing was that the girl's appearance and temperament were said to be somewhat like me when I was younger, especially her profile and the way she smiled softly with her head down. This news, somehow, reached the ears of the girl who had always lingered in Shannon's life but never received a commitment. It became the last straw that broke the camel's back. Years of waiting, arguing, resentment, consumed youth, and the ultimate humiliation of a replacement finally caused her paranoia to completely snap. She obtained sulfuric acid. The incident occurred in the underground parking lot of Shannon's new company. There was no fierce argument. It was said that she approached him unusually calmly and called out his name. In the instant he turned his head, perhaps with a hint of impatience and annoyance. She splashed the liquid from the bottle directly at his face. Agonizing pain and screams echoed through the garage. When the security guards arrived, they saw her standing there, watching Shannon writhing on the ground in agony, his face disfigured, her face wearing an almost manic calm, even a strange smile. When she was subdued, she did not struggle, but clearly said to the man on the ground, who was once handsome and dashing but now looked hideous, "Shannon, look. Who else would want you now besides me?" That sentence became the most cruel footnote to this twisted relationship. It wasn't love, but destructive possession. If I can't have you, I'll destroy you, so no one can have you. In the end, I still went to the hospital, a week after the incident, with an almost cold, procedural feeling. The smell of disinfectant was strong and pungent. Outside the ward, I saw Shannon's parents, who had aged instantly. When they saw me, their eyes were complex, with shame, grief, and a hint of unspeakable resentment. As if my current calmness was also a sin, I didn't enter the ward, but only glanced through the glass window on the door. He lay there, his head and neck wrapped in thick bandages, with only his eyes and nose area exposed. His skin a terrible, uneven mix of scorched brown and bright red. The instruments emitted regular beeping sounds. The once handsome face that had attracted countless eyes was now a canvas violently smeared beyond recognition. His appearance, which he possessed, relied on, and once used as one of his assets, was completely destroyed, along with his life built on false perfection. There was no joy in my heart, only a cold sigh. A farce that began with desire and betrayal ended in such a tragic way, with no winners. When I left the hospital, the sun was shining. I walked to the parking lot, opened the car door, and sat down. I didn't start the car immediately, but just sat there quietly for a while. On my phone, Sway sent a voice message, excitedly saying that the painting he did in art class today won first place, and asked if we could have braised pork ribs for dinner tonight. Listening to my son's clear voice, watching the people coming and going outside the car window, busy with their ordinary lives, I suddenly felt how precious it was to have such trivial and real worries and joys. Shannon and his world, his love and hate entanglements, his destruction and redemption, were truly irrelevant to me from now on. It was like a novel that had been read, with an ending that was not very pleasant, that could be gently closed and placed back on the most rarely touched corner of the bookshelf. I replied to Sway, "Okay, Mommy will buy ribs. Let's go home." The car drove out of the hospital and merged into the traffic. The sunlight shone through the windshield, on the steering wheel, warm and comforting. My path lies ahead, flat, open, and bathed in sunlight. The scenery in the rearview mirror, no matter how vivid or shocking it may have been, is rapidly receding into the distance, shrinking into a blurry and insignificant dot, and I can finally wholeheartedly embrace my future. In that future, there are my words, my thoughts, my son, and this hard one, grounded and free ordinary life. The wind blows, bringing the fragrance of distant flowers. This time, there is only warmth, no harshness.